Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery preparing to check in on a bin of red wiggler worms. And these little guys have the job of breaking down kitchen scraps and other household waste. And they do a really nice job. This particular group of worms have been living in this bin over here for 158 days. And we gave them my typical routine of feeding down the middle for the first 2 feedings. But then after that, we proceeded into this pattern of feeding the system in a different corner each time. So now over the system's lifetime, it's been fed 13 times, 11 which have been done in this so-called pocket style. Imagine this is a billiard table and each corner is a pocket, so I consider those as pocket feedings. We used a coffee filter over here in the corner to indicate where we last fed. It's a pattern that we rotate around the bin clockwise. So today's feeding is going to be going over into this corner here. But before we head over there, why don't we just do a quick reverse lap through the system to see how the last feeding, which was 8 days ago, did. We gave them watermelon rinds. And, well, part of the feeding today includes watermelon, but not the rind. This time they get the actual watermelon itself. I've also got some coffee, and in between the two you could see a couple banana peels slid in there. And you know, come to think of it, I guess we can even use this coffee filter here as supplemental bedding in the feeding zone, and then use the new filter that's coming with the coffee portion today as the feeding zone indicator. So after 8 days, I suppose watermelon rind probably doesn't really stand a chance. I'm thinking perhaps we'll bump into a little bit of the green outer portion of it, like we can see right here. And there's even a little bit of material stuck to it that they've not yet nibbled off. And I'm seeing other leftovers here too. This is banana peel too. So today's feeding is very reminiscent of the last feeding 8 days ago. More banana peel. I saw a stem over here too. Stem might take a little bit longer than the rest of the stuff in here, but in due time the worms eventually break everything down. You can also see some paper towel or napkin or whatever this was used as supplemental bedding down in the feeding zone. So the worms appear like they've started to make themselves at home in this corner, working down the foods. Haven't really polished it off yet entirely, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure that within another short period of time we won't be coming back in here and seeing any more watermelon rinds. Perhaps we'll bump into the stem of the banana or some other things, but after only 8 days it's not too surprising that we're coming back in here and finding some leftover foods that the worms have not yet managed to consume. But there's a good many worms in this corner. There's a good amount of moisture in here too. And I guess that's got a lot to do with the reason we converted over last time from having plastic coverings on this system to only a newspaper covering. Look at those nice healthy worms. They look pretty happy to me. It seems to me when worms are happy and healthy, they're very lively and fast moving, which means you put them out in the bright lights like that, they'll scurry out of view pretty fast. If the worms are not doing so good, they're not going to be quite as lively. They might not be quite as plump. I think that often has a lot to do with the amount of moisture that they've got at their disposal in their environment. So I had a feeling checking in on the last feeding from only 8 days ago that consisted of some really delicious foods would be a good one. That we would find lots and lots of wormies hard at work trying to polish off what they'd been given there. But before we get over there, let's continue on. So going to the pocket that was fed 2 visits ago. Once again, Seems like we've got a good many worms hanging out in this stuff. I didn't really go so far back as to see what we fed them last 2 feedings ago, but I did play the video back really quick from the last check-in just to refresh my memory on what they got last time. Whatever it is that they got fed here last time, perhaps there's still a little bit of it lingering as far as leftovers, but if there is, I can't say that I spotted anything that I recognized. Here again, I felt like there was a good bit of moisture down there. So I got a feeling that taking the plastic covers off this system was probably a good idea. I'd like to see the system not become overly damp and muddy. It seems like you get to a certain point and then you have to just sort of decide that it's not going to get any more wet than this. At some point you'll want to try to reel it back and maintain a certain degree of control over the system's moisture level. And sometimes I allow things to get just a little bit overly damp, and then things start to get clumpy and sticking together and looking a little bit messy, getting stuck to my glove. But I bet you the worms really like it, even if I don't like it that much. So we're finally back to the corner where we're going to be feeding now. 1 feeding ago, 2, 3. This is going back 4 feedings. I definitely don't remember what was fed over here. And it seems very unlikely that we would find leftovers of whatever it was that was placed into this corner all those feedings ago. But it often does seem pretty likely that you're going to bump into a number of worms. Maybe you'll actually find some stuff that's leftovers of past feedings. Like this right here in my hand, I could tell just from its texture. It's the outside of a piece of corn cob. I didn't really keep very close tabs on what kind of stuff had been fed to this system. Sometimes I do, most cases I don't. Here we've got the outer husk of a mango seed. And whether we encounter any other recognizable items down here in the feeding zone, I don't know. But I figured let's make sure we've given ourselves plenty of room to feed. And you know, I'm almost wondering if perhaps before we do that, it might be a good idea to, I don't know, just something about all this leafy matter out on the top surface. I thought it might be kind of nice to blend it in a little bit. With only a newspaper top covering, which has remained kind of dry, the leafy matter that was right below it also seemed to remain somewhat dry. So I figured rather than having some really nice leafy matter sitting out here on the surface, dry, perhaps we could just blend it in with some of the surrounding materials and sort of take the edge off a little bit and take that muddiness aspect of it out of the picture, at least a little bit. And here and there I have encountered other little bits of leftover food stuff. Like here we see the skin of some cantaloupe melon, and here was perhaps the outer shell of a avocado, and I think what I saw over here was perhaps another chunk of corn cob that I placed over there. This to me feels like perhaps another chunk of corn cob. But I think we've given ourselves plenty of space into which we can position today's feeding. And what I've got for bedding for them today is something I've been trying to make a habit of in a number of my systems, which is napkins, of which I have a fairly large number collected up. Sometimes when I'm creating my bedding, my prepared bedding, and I'm running cardboard and newspaper and other paper products through the shredder, sometimes here and there I'll include a napkin or two. But for the most part, napkins do seem to pile up here, and it seemed to me like if I were to start giving them a little bit more attention and utilization in my feedings, then that might be a good thing, you know. So some of these leftover food scraps we encountered while excavating can go back down kind of plop those in on top of the napkins, and let's not forget we wanted to also supplement their feeding zones bedding supply with this coffee filter, because we've got two, right? Because one of them I used since I anticipated this watermelon to start melting and kicking off a whole bunch of moisture. I figured I would place it on a piece of paper that would go ahead and absorb that moisture. And then here on top of the watermelon go a couple more banana peels. And I bet you the worms are already thinking, oh my goodness, what an awesome feeding. Can't wait to get in there. This feeding zone indicator, or this coffee filter, I guess it only becomes a feeding zone indicator once we actually use it as such. I'll just go ahead and set that aside and keep it with the collection. At some point in the near future, I'm sure we'll have a use for it, but now I think we're pretty much in good shape as far as having sufficient materials here with which to backfill the feeding zone and level off. It does seem like we've leveled off pretty nicely. I definitely like the way those leaves are when you come into a system and you find a whole bunch of nice leaves out on the top surface. I'm going to go ahead and bring out my box of leaves here to do the same as we did last time, which is to provide the system with a nice top coating of leafy matter. I suppose it's also serving as a moisture barrier, almost like a mulch layer, to help keep the system's moisture down within the system. I don't get the sense that it's absorbing a bunch of moisture. I sense that it's maybe picking a little bit up and basically helping the material below it maintain its moisture. So even from that aspect, I like it. And with the paper coverings, I'm assuming that the system is going to be able to continue losing a little bit of its moisture content, but perhaps not much. Not during these humid days of summer. So that's it for our check-in now, with the red wigglers doing really nice here in the pocket fed system. We started up here. We did a 1, 2, 3, 4 feeding once around, then we went 1, 2, 3, 4 a second time around, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, that being the 12th pocket feeding. That's actually almost 3 times around. Technically, I guess it'll be all the way around once we get back to feeding over here next time. So that's it for the check-in, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.